First, I'd just like to make the point that we're very fortunate that His Majesty has allowed us to use Buckingham Palace for this event, and I need to say that.
A royal scandal is emerging like never before. If you enjoy unearthing surprising stories from within the palace gates, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. It began softly, behind closed doors, with whispers of gems going missing following Queen Elizabeth II's death. The rumors were initially rejected as supposition, but indisputable signs soon emerged. The most explosive moment occurred when Queen Camilla purportedly placed one of Elizabeth's most costly possessions, a historic diamond tiara estimated to be worth more than $15 million, in a private auction. The discovery shocked those closest to the late Queen, particularly her daughter, Princess Anne. Many were even more surprised to learn that this was not the first time something like this has occurred. According to reports, Camilla has already covertly sold off other jewels, placing them in discreet auctions under assumed ownership and pocketing enormous sums of money while keeping the entire ordeal out of the public view. Anne, who held her mother's heritage in high regard, saw this as more than betrayal. It was an assault on the Queen's memory. The missing heirlooms only fueled the suspicion. Following Elizabeth's death, items such as the Victorian diamond brooch, a sapphire necklace once worn at state banquets, an emerald choker with ties to previous kings, and even Diana's renowned pearls inexplicably disappeared. Each object was not just extremely valuable financially, but also historically and emotionally significant. To see them vanish without a trace sparked an unpleasant question. Where were they going and who benefited? Then came the whistleblower. An insider stated that the treasures were not lost, but rather hidden. According to testimony, Camilla kept them in a secret vault at her Wiltshire estate, Raymill House, away from official royal records and responsibility. The revelation was nothing short of damning, implying a concerted effort to conceal some of the Crown's most prized assets. This was the spark Anne needed. Her determination shifted from suspicion to action, setting the stage for a confrontation that would shake the monarchy at its core. Anne's investigation was nothing short of meticulous. Known for her no-nonsense approach, she quietly assembled a small circle of allies she could trust. Among them were seasoned royal protection officers who had guarded the late Queen herself. Together, they pieced together a trail of evidence. Photographs of the missing jewels, suspicious delivery logs, and even testimonies from staff members who had witnessed packages being discreetly moved into Raymill House under Camilla's supervision. Every lead pointed to the same conclusion. The heirlooms weren't misplaced, nor had they been lost to time. They had been deliberately taken out of royal custody. Anne understood the gravity of her mission. Not only were these jewels priceless, but they symbolized continuity, duty, and the unbroken line of monarchs stretching back through centuries. Their absence wasn't just a scandal, it threatened to stain Elizabeth's legacy forever. The deeper Anne dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. Certain auctions across Europe and the Middle East had seen anonymous sellers offering rare jewels that bore striking resemblance to pieces in the royal archives. Expert jewelers quietly confirmed what Anne already suspected. Some of the most treasured items had been discreetly sold, their origins scrubbed clean by clever middlemen. Even though Camilla's name never appeared on the paperwork, the timing of the sales matched perfectly with the jewels' disappearance from Windsor and Buckingham inventories. Anne also discovered that some staff members who tried to raise concerns had been abruptly dismissed or pressured into silence. One former butler, speaking in confidence, described being ordered to transport special items late at night from Clarence House to Raymill under strict instructions never to ask questions. Another member of the household staff recalled seeing Diana's unmistakable pearl bracelet, once a wedding gift from the Spencer family, being locked away in a velvet-lined case destined for the estate. These testimonies painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Still, Anne knew her word alone would not be enough to challenge the sitting queen. If she were to make her move, she needed undeniable proof and the right moment to deliver it. She began compiling everything into a carefully documented dossier. Each piece of evidence placed in chronological order, what she uncovered made her both furious and resolute. She was about to confront Camilla head-on, and she would not back down until the truth was exposed. That confrontation was destined to erupt, not in secrecy, but in the very heart of the royal circle, where silence could no longer shield the truth. The tension reached its peak at Clarence House, where Princess Anne decided it was time to act. She arrived with her dossier in hand, every detail neatly organized, photos of the jewels, statements from household staff, shipping records, and even auction catalogs that mirrored the missing heirlooms. Anne was not there to speculate. She was there to accuse. In a private sitting room, Anne confronted Camilla directly. Her words were sharp, unflinching, and impossible to dismiss. She laid out the evidence piece by piece, building her case like a prosecutor in a courtroom. The message was clear: return Queen Elizabeth's jewels, or Anne would go public and allow the entire world to see the truth. Those present described the scene as icy, with Anne's fury barely contained, and Camilla attempting to maintain her composure behind a strained smile. For Camilla, the ultimatum was a devastating threat. If Anne carried out her warning, the consequences would extend far beyond embarrassment. The jewels represented not only wealth, but trust, and their disappearance tied directly to Camilla's reputation as queen. Losing them in public scandal could mean permanent damage to her standing with the royal family and the public at large. But instead of backing down, Camilla launched a counteroffensive. Behind closed doors, she turned to King Charles, framing Anne as unstable, overly emotional, and even dangerous to the harmony of the monarchy. Camilla's version of events painted herself as the victim of a vindictive sister-in-law, insisting that Anne's paranoia was causing unnecessary fractures within the family. Some insiders whispered that Camilla even began drafting plans to quietly reduce Anne's royal duties, hoping to sideline her and weaken her influence before the confrontation spread any further. Anne, however, was not so easily silenced. Just as the confrontation reached its boiling point, a new piece of evidence surfaced, one that tipped the scales entirely in Anne's favor. Among Elizabeth's personal papers tucked away in Balmoral was a sealed letter written by the late Queen herself. The letter explicitly named Anne as the guardian of her jewels, entrusting her with the responsibility of protecting them for future generations. Even more damning, Elizabeth had left a warning for Camilla, urging her not to misuse or claim the heirlooms for herself. The discovery of this letter was like a thunderclap. Suddenly, Anne was not just acting on suspicion, she was fulfilling her mother's dying wish. With the Queen's words on her side, she now held undeniable moral authority, one that even Camilla could not so easily twist or erase. From that moment, the battle over the jewels transformed from a private clash into something much larger, setting the stage for a scandal that would soon explode beyond palace walls. The scandal could no longer be contained. Word of the missing jewels and the late Queen's sealed letter began to leak, first whispered by palace insiders, then carried by reporters who sensed story too big to ignore. Within days, headlines around the globe blazed with the revelation. Priceless royal heirlooms were missing, and Queen Camilla stood accused of hiding them away. The backlash was immediate and fierce. The public, already sensitive to the weight of tradition and symbolism, reacted with outrage. These jewels were not just trinkets, they were history itself. They had been worn by Elizabeth at coronations, state visits, and moments of national unity. Their disappearance struck a deep nerve, leaving many to question how such treasures could vanish under Camilla's watch. Calls for transparency grew louder with every passing day, and pressure mounted for a full accounting of the royal collection. Then, an unexpected voice entered the storm: Prince Harry. From across the ocean, he released letters written by his late mother, Princess Diana. Among them was a passage confirming that Diana's pearl bracelet, an intimate and deeply personal heirloom, was now hidden in Camilla's private vault. The revelation didn't just add to the scandal, it connected Camilla's alleged actions to one of the most beloved figures in modern royal history. Diana's words carried weight, and Harry's decision to reveal them poured fuel on an already raging fire. Suddenly, the scandal was no longer about jewels alone. It was about trust, memory, and betrayal. International media framed the saga as a battle for the soul of the monarchy itself. Was the crown safeguarding its past, or was it being fractured from within? Anne's determination to honor Elizabeth's legacy was now echoed by millions who felt the loss personally, as if history itself was being stolen from them. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Camilla's circle shrank. Advisors who had once defended her grew nervous, unwilling to be tied to the unfolding disaster. Pressure weighed heavily on Charles as well, caught between his sister's unshakable evidence and his wife's desperate denials. Behind every closed door, arguments erupted over loyalty, legacy, and survival. The scandal reached a point of no return. Anne knew the time for diplomacy had passed. The truth needed to be laid bare in the most undeniable setting of all, the royal family's summer retreat at Balmoral Castle. It was there, on ground tied so closely to Elizabeth's memory, that Anne prepared to make her final move. At Balmoral Castle, the weight of history hung in the air. The sprawling estate had always been Elizabeth's sanctuary, a place of reflection and quiet strength. Now, it would serve as the stage for a reckoning that could no longer be delayed. Princess Anne arrived armed with every piece of evidence she had gathered: the photographs, the testimonies, the auction records, and most importantly, her mother's sealed letter naming her guardian of the jewels. The royal family assembled in a private chamber, a gathering that many would later describe as tense, beyond measure. Camilla sat rigid, her composure fraying while Charles shifted uneasily, torn between his wife and his sister. Anne spoke with a calm but forceful authority, laying the entire case before them. Each piece of evidence stacked higher until the truth was inescapable. For hours, the confrontation unfolded. Camilla denied, deflected, and even tried to downplay the missing heirlooms as a matter of misunderstood record-keeping. But Anne's evidence was ironclad. Staff testimonies contradicted Camilla's words. Auction records showed exact matches to jewels last seen in Elizabeth's possession, and the late Queen's letter stood as a final, undeniable judgment. By the time Anne finished, silence fell over the room. Everyone present knew the truth. Camilla had taken what was never hers to claim. The jewels were not mere ornaments. They were threads woven into the tapestry of the monarchy. And Elizabeth's wish was clear. They were to be preserved, protected, and passed down, not hidden away or sold. At last, Camilla gave in. Under the evidence and the moral authority of Elizabeth's final words, she agreed to return the jewels. The Victorian diamond brooch, the sapphire necklace, the emerald choker, Diana's pearls, and countless other treasures were to be restored to the royal collection. But the damage had already been done. The jewels might return, but trust would not. Anne's victory came at a heavy price. The fracture in the family was permanent. Camilla's image, already fragile, was left in tatters before the eyes of the world. For Anne, the confrontation was not about power, but about duty, fulfilling her mother's final wish, and ensuring the crown's legacy was safeguarded. In the end, Balmoral became both a place of reckoning and of resolution. The jewels returned to their rightful place, but the memory of how close they came to being lost forever would haunt the monarchy for years to come. Anne had stood firm, and history would remember that she was the who defended Elizabeth's treasures when they were most at risk. The storm surrounding the jewels didn't truly end at Balmoral, it only changed shape. The treasures themselves were brought back into the royal vaults, restored to their rightful place, but the wounds that had been opened remained raw and visible to everyone who followed the saga. For the monarchy, which so often relies on quiet dignity and seamless continuity, this scandal was a scar that could not easily be hidden. Every piece returned carried with it a haunting story. The Victorian diamond brooch, once pinned proudly to Elizabeth's gown at historic banquets, had narrowly escaped the fate of being sold to anonymous collectors. The sapphire necklace, sparkling with centuries of memory, was nearly lost to history. The emerald choker, tied to past queens and preserved as a link between generations, had been stashed away in a private vault instead of the royal archives where it belonged. And perhaps most painful of all, Diana's pearls, once a symbol of grace, love, and tragedy, had become bargaining chips in Camilla's alleged schemes. The jewels were back, but they were no longer untouched. They had been tainted by secrecy and betrayal. Princess Anne, however, remained unwavering. For her, the outcome was a victory, though one with a heavy emotional cost. She had stood alone when no one else dared to challenge Camilla. She had gathered evidence, confronted deception, and placed her mother's legacy above family unity. The sealed letter from Elizabeth had been her compass throughout the ordeal, a clear, undeniable directive that the jewels were to be safeguarded by Anne herself. When she held that letter in her hand, it wasn't just paper and ink, it was her mother's voice, guiding her, reminding her of the duty that outlived the Queen's reign. But fulfilling that duty came at a price. The confrontation at Balmoral created fractures that could not be repaired. Trust between Anne and Camilla was shattered beyond repair, and the rest of the family was forced to take sides, or to remain silent, which was just as telling. Even Charles, torn between loyalty to his sister and to his wife, could not escape the weight of the scandal. His indecision and reliance on Camilla's version of events left a lingering question. How much had he known, and how much had he chosen not to see? For Camilla, the fallout was devastating. Though she retained her position beside Charles, her public image suffered irreparably. The revelations painted her not as a custodian of history, but as someone who had sought to benefit from it. Whispers about her secret vault at Ray Mill House refused to die down, and her earlier attempts to frame Anne as unstable were seen in hindsight as calculated manipulation. The jewels had been returned, but suspicion lingered like a shadow over every public appearance she made. Allies who once defended her began to distance themselves, unwilling to be tainted by association with the scandal. Meanwhile, the press and public transformed the affair into something larger than jewels. It became a debate about trust, honor, and the very role of the monarchy in preserving history. The idea that heirlooms so central to Britain's heritage could be hidden away for personal gain struck many as unthinkable. International outlets framed it as a cautionary tale of how legacy can be fractured from within, while historians and curators expressed relief that the pieces were saved, but also alarmed that such a thing could have happened at all. And then there was Diana's voice, echoing from beyond. Through Harry's release of her letters, the scandal reached a deeper emotional note. The confirmation that her pearl bracelet, so personal, so symbolic, had been hidden away in Camilla's vault, brought the issue out of the realm of royal politics and into the heart of the public. Diana's words, paired with Anne's defiance, made the saga feel less like an aristocratic squabble and more like a moral battle about respect, memory, and betrayal. In the end, the jewels were safe. They once again rested in the royal vaults, protected for future generations. But their story had changed forever. They were no longer silent ornaments. They were witnesses to a bitter conflict that shook the family to its core. Each time they are worn in the future, the memory of their near loss will linger, reminding everyone of the storm that almost consumed them. The true legacy of this scandal wasn't in the diamonds or pearls themselves. It was in the people who fought for them. Anne proved herself as the guardian her mother believed her to be, unwavering in her loyalty to Elizabeth's memory. Camilla, despite returning the jewels, was left with a reputation scarred by suspicion. And the monarchy itself learned a painful lesson: that history can be stolen not by outsiders, but by those within, and that its greatest treasures depend not only on vaults and locks, but on the integrity of those entrusted to protect them. At Balmoral, Elizabeth's presence was felt in every corner of the confrontation. Her letter, her legacy, and her memory served as the ultimate verdict. In the end, her voice spoke louder than Camilla's denials, louder than the scandals in the press, and louder than the fractures within the family. Anne carried that voice forward, ensuring that, for all the turmoil, the Queen's will was honored. The jewels remain intact, the monarchy endures, but the story of how close they came to being lost forever will not fade. It is a chapter that reminds the world that even in the most gilded halls, truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, it cannot be ignored.